All right, let's jump right in. I want you to picture something. We're in Oulu, Finland, a city right on the edge of the Arctic Circle, and it's getting ready to be the European capital of culture. Now, it's here that the European Cultural Parliament got together, and they weren't just there to celebrate. No, they were there to face this huge, urgent threat, something they've started calling cultural climate change.
And the tone was set right from the get-go. Minister Par Standback, he did not mince words. This was not just another conference, it was a call to arms, a rallying cry for artists, for thinkers, for cultural leaders everywhere. And the stakes? Well, they couldn't be higher. We're talking about the very soul of European civilization.
So what is this cultural climate change they're talking about? Well, it's this really powerful metaphor, right? It's for all those shifts in our society that are kind of invisible, but you can definitely feel them happening. Think of it like the climate crisis for the planet, but instead it's for our values, our freedoms. It's this rising tide of disinformation, the slow erosion of democratic norms. It's like the political atmosphere is heating up with authoritarian pressure. And this was the lens for every single discussion they had. So, where do you even start to fight a threat like this? For the parliament, the first step was to face this ideological storm head-on, and that meant asking a really critical question. How do you defend culture when the very idea of it is being turned into a weapon? Right at the heart of this whole conflict, the parliament members basically saw two completely opposing visions for what culture should even be. On one side, you've got democratic culture. It thrives on different ideas, on freedom of expression. But then, on the other side, you have this authoritarian model, and it uses ideas like national purity and identity politics as weapons to divide people and to control them. It is just a fundamental clash of values. And look, this isn't just some academic debate. The members pointed to very real, tangible threats. We're talking about that daily flood of disinformation you see all over social media. We're talking about political leaders who are demanding artists be censored. And what's really chilling is the misuse of history and tradition to stir up nationalist and even fascist movements. One speaker actually called it the negative side of culture, a stark reminder that culture itself can be a battleground.
And nowhere is this battle more tragically real than in Ukraine. In an address he gave remotely to the parliament, Ukrainian member Viktor Rubin gave this absolutely devastating account of the war's toll. He said, it's not just about bombed-out theaters. It's a systematic attempt to erase an entire identity, a psychological assault designed to completely break the spirit of a nation.
So you had this ideological war going on, but at the very same time, there's another crisis brewing, an economic one. As Europe starts rearming to face new threats, it's the arts that are really feeling the squeeze. Just take a look at this number, 130 million euros. Now, that's not a country's entire budget. That is the amount the cultural budget was cut in a single city, Berlin, for just 1 year. This isn't some far-off theoretical problem. It's happening right now, and it's forcing institutions to make these impossible choices, like do we keep the lights on or do we keep our doors open? See, all across the continent, governments are ramping up their defense spending in a big way. You look at Finland, for example, spending billions to secure its long border with Russia. And as one delegate pointed out, it's hard to argue against the need to prepare for those kinds of physical threats, right? But here's the inevitable consequence. It creates this dilemma that one speaker called a Sophie's choice, a truly heartbreaking decision between funding defense and funding the arts. It really forces us all to ask, what exactly are we trying to protect here? This whole dilemma reminds me of that famous story about Winston Churchill. During World War II, he was supposedly asked to cut arts funding to help the war effort, and his reply just frames the challenge perfectly. He supposedly said, then what are we fighting for? If we sacrifice our art, our stories, our creativity just for the sake of security, what of real value is actually left to secure? But the mood back in Oulu wasn't one of despair, not at all. It was about strategy. The members pivoted from just defining the crisis to actually plotting a counteroffensive. They started asking, okay, how can culture fight back? And out of all these discussions, a pretty clear three-pronged response started to take shape. First up, cultural diplomacy, building bridges to foster understanding across borders. Second, creative resistance, using art itself as a direct form of protest. And third, building resilience, strengthening culture and democratic values from the ground up. And a fantastic example of that cultural diplomacy in action is something called the transatlantic dialogue. For years, this project has been bringing together academics, artists, and leaders to just talk and to bridge divides. Even when politics got really tense, they kept the conversation going. They saw it as an obligation to maintain those connections. It just goes to show you the long-term power of building those relationships.
Then you have the more direct action, right? Creative resistance. And artists are finding some truly ingenious ways to protest. In Riga, for instance, they renamed the street where the Russian embassy is located to Ukrainian Independence Street. And right nearby, a museum put up this 3-story, very unflattering portrait of Putin, so the embassy staff would have to see it every single day. Look, these aren't just symbolic gestures. They are powerful, creative ways to seize the narrative back.
So, okay, why should any of this matter to those of us who weren't in that hall in Oulu? Well, because this isn't just some abstract conversation happening somewhere far away. The thing is, the outcome of this cultural climate change, it affects every single one of us. It's what determines whether our societies are open or closed, whether we value diversity or demand that everyone thinks the same way. It's about the art we get to see, the books we're allowed to read, the ideas we're free to discuss. It's about the very air we breathe, culturally speaking. At the end of the day, the European Cultural Parliament can only sound the alarm. The real fight for culture, it doesn't happen in conference halls. It happens every single time we choose to go to a gallery, or support a local artist, or stand up for a challenging idea. So the final question isn't just for them, it's for all of us. In this changing cultural climate, what will you choose to protect?